Commander Zexathara sat in the gray metal chair and looked at the recording device on the table. 3 years had passed since the war ended, but his forearms still shook when he thought about the humans. The documentary team waited for him to speak. They wanted to hear about the brave human soldiers who saved the galaxy. They did not know what he really saw during those terrible months. The Corvan commander had fought in 17 wars before he met humans. He was known across the galaxy for staying calm in battle. Other species called him the Iron Mind because nothing could shake him. That changed when the Devourers came to his homeworld and the humans arrived to help. The Devourers were like nothing the galaxy had seen before. They moved as one mind across space and ate entire worlds. When they came to a planet, they would consume every living thing and turn it into more of themselves. The Galactic Alliance had lost 12 systems to them in just 6 months. Corva was supposed to be next. Zexathara had prepared his people for a last stand. The Corvan military was strong, but they knew they could not win. The Devourers had already destroyed 2 fleets that came to stop them. When the human ships appeared in orbit, Zexathara felt relief for the first time in weeks. He had heard humans were good fighters. He thought they would follow the same battle plans as other Alliance species. Captain Jake Martinez was the first human Zexathara met. The man was tall and thin with dark hair and calm brown eyes. He looked like he should be teaching children, not fighting wars. When Martinez walked into the command center, he did not salute or introduce himself properly. He just looked at the battle maps and started asking strange questions. How fast did the Devourers digest organic matter? Martinez asked. What temperature kills their cell structure? Do they feel pain when separated from the hive mind? Zexathara tried to explain that these questions did not matter for battle tactics. Martinez just smiled and said everything mattered when you understood the enemy. The first battle happened 3 days later. Zexathara watched from the command ship as Devourer biovessels dropped toward the planet's surface. He expected the humans to attack with plasma cannons and missile strikes like every other species. Instead, they did something that made his blood run cold. The human soldiers landed right next to the Devourers and started collecting body parts from dead enemies. They cut open the creatures while they were still moving, and took samples of their blood and organs. Martinez explained over the radio that they needed to understand Devourer biology before they could fight them properly. Dr. Lisa Wang arrived on the planet's surface 6 hours later. She was a small woman with black hair who wore a white coat covered in strange stains. She set up a field laboratory right in the middle of the battle zone and started experiments on living Devourer prisoners. When Zexathara asked if this was allowed by Alliance law, she said the Devourers started the war, so normal rules did not apply. Within 12 hours, Dr. Wang had created a virus that attacked Devourer brain tissue. She loaded it into missiles and fired them at the enemy ships in orbit. Zexathara watched in horror as the Devourers began attacking each other. The virus made them lose connection to their hive mind, and they could not tell friend from enemy anymore. The Corvan commander had never seen anything like it. In all his years of war, he had fought enemies with honor and followed the ancient codes of battle. The humans treated war like a science experiment. They did not just want to win. They wanted to understand everything about their enemies so they could destroy them completely. Sergeant Nina Torres was the human who scared Zexathara the most. She was a Marine with short red hair and green eyes who laughed during firefights. She collected Devourer weapons and body parts like they were toys. When asked why she did this, Torres said she wanted to remember every enemy she had killed. She kept count in a small notebook and seemed proud of the number. But the worst thing the humans did was turn Corva itself into a weapon. Dr. Wang brought bacteria from Earth and released it into the planet atmosphere. She explained that Devourers could not process these Earth germs and would get sick if they tried to consume anything on the planet. The bacteria would not hurt Corvans, but it would poison any Devourer that tried to feed. Zexathara realized the humans had turned his homeworld into a trap. Any Devourer that came to feed would die from eating the very food they needed to survive. It was like poisoning a well, but on a planetary scale. When he asked Dr. Wang if this was safe for his people, she said the bacteria would die out in a few years. Probably. The battle for Corva lasted only 6 days. The humans did not just defeat the Devourers, they made the creatures afraid to come near the planet. The enemy ships retreated to deep space and never returned. But Zexathara did not feel like celebrating. He kept thinking about how easily the humans had rewritten the rules of war. Captain Martinez found him. standing on the observation deck looking down at Corva. The human was still smiling that calm teacher smile, but now it looked different to Zexithara. Martinez explained that this was just the beginning. The humans had learned so much about devourer biology that they could now fight them anywhere in the galaxy. "We do not just fight wars," Martinez said. "We solve problems. The devourers were a problem, and now we understand how to fix that problem everywhere we find it." He talked about the enemy like they were broken machines that needed repair, not living beings with their own right to exist. That night, Zexthara could not sleep. He kept thinking about the way Martinez smiled when he watched the devourers die from their own converted bioweapons. It was not the smile of a soldier who had won a battle. It was the smile of a scientist who had completed a successful experiment. The humans had not just saved Corva, they had used it as a testing ground for new ways to kill. The next morning, Admiral Kyle Brooks arrived with the main human fleet. He was an older man with gray hair and cold blue eyes who talked about the war like it was a business meeting. Brooks told Zexithara that the Alliance had voted to put humans in charge of the war effort. Other species would provide support, but humans would make all the important decisions. Zexithara wanted to object, but he could not argue with results. The humans had saved his world in less than a week using methods no other species had even considered. But as he watched them prepare for the next battle, he began to understand something that made his forearms shake with fear. The humans were not just better at war than other species. They were different in a way that went deeper than tactics or technology. They looked at every living thing as either a resource to be used or a problem to be solved. Even their allies were just pieces on a game board that could be moved around to achieve victory. Zexthara realized that humans did not see war the same way other species did. For them, it was not about honor or survival or protecting their homes. It was about imposing their will on the universe itself. As the human fleet prepared to leave for the next system, Zexithara was ordered to join them as a liaison officer. He would spend the next year fighting alongside these strange allies and learning things about war that he wished he had never discovered. The galaxy thought humans had come to save them from the devourers. Zexthara was beginning to suspect they had simply traded one monster for another. 6 months into the war, Zexthara had seen enough human battles to understand they were not like other species. The Corvan commander now served on Admiral Brooks' flagship and watched humans fight across 12 different star systems. Every battle taught him something new about how terrifying his allies really were. The humans never just wanted to win battles. They wanted to collect information about every enemy they faced. Captain Martinez explained this during a strategy meeting in the war room. He stood in front of a large screen showing devourer biology charts and spoke like a teacher giving a lesson to students. "Every time we fight them, we learn something new," Martinez said. How they communicate with each other. How they make decisions as a group. What makes them afraid? We are not just fighting this war, we are studying it. So no species like them can ever threaten the galaxy again. Admiral Brooks nodded and brought up more charts on the screen. These showed weaknesses the humans had discovered in dozens of different alien species during the war. Not just devourers, but also their own allies. Zexthara saw detailed reports about Corvan military tactics and biological vulnerabilities. His own people were being studied like lab animals. The Admiral explained that humans planned for every possible future threat. They had learned from their own history that being unprepared led to extinction. On Earth, humans had almost been wiped out many times by disease and climate change and wars. They would never let that happen again to themselves or to species they protected. Dr. Wang had been busy during those 6 months. She now ran 17 research stations across Alliance space where she studied alien biology. She called it medical research, but Zexthara had seen her real work. She was creating weapons designed to kill specific species in specific ways. Each weapon was tailored to exploit unique biological weaknesses. The doctor showed Zexthara her laboratory on the flagship. Rows of containers held samples from every species in the Alliance. Corvan blood and tissue sat next to samples from dozens of other worlds. Wang explained that she needed to understand how each species worked so she could help them better. But her research notes told a different story. Sergeant Torres had been promoted to lieutenant, but she still collected trophies from every battle. Her quarters were filled with weapons and body parts from enemies she had killed. She treated each one like a prize from a hunting trip. Torres showed Zexithara a devourer brain she kept in a jar, and explained how cutting it out had taught her about their nervous system. The worst part was how normal the humans made it all seem. They talked about extinction like other species talked about farming or building houses. Dr. Wang would discuss the best ways to wipe out entire populations while eating lunch. Admiral Brooks planned the deaths of millions while reviewing his daily schedule. They had turned genocide into office work. During the battle for the Helix Nebula, Zexthera watched humans deploy their newest weapon against the Devourers. Dr. Wang had created something she called a consciousness virus. It did not kill the hive mind creatures right away. Instead, it forced them to experience individual thoughts and feelings before they died. The virus spread through the Devourer fleet like wildfire. Creatures that had shared one mind for millions of years suddenly found themselves alone and afraid. They did not know how to function as individuals. The confusion and terror drove them insane before the virus finally killed them. It was the cruelest thing Zexthera had ever seen. Captain Martinez watched the enemy ships tear themselves apart and smiled that same calm teacher smile. He explained to Zexthera that the virus was not just a weapon but also an experiment. The humans wanted to understand what happened when a hive mind consciousness was broken apart. The knowledge might be useful against other collective species in the future. The human soldiers celebrated after the battle like they had just won a sporting event. They kept score of how many enemy ships they had destroyed and compared their numbers with other units. Lieutenant Torres had painted small Devourer symbols on her armor to mark her kills. She was up to 300 and seemed proud of reaching that milestone. Admiral Brooks held a victory party in the flagship mess hall. Human officers drank alcohol and told stories about their most creative kills. They laughed about the way Devourers looked when the consciousness virus hit them. One young officer did an impression of a dying hive mind creature that made everyone laugh until their sides hurt. Zexthera could not understand how beings could find such joy in causing suffering. In Corvan culture, warriors honored their enemies even in death. Battle was serious business that required respect for all life. But humans treated war like entertainment. They seemed to enjoy the process of killing as much as the victory that came after. During the party, Dr. Wang approached Zexthera with a datapad in her hands. She wanted to show him her latest research project. The screen displayed detailed plans for biological weapons designed to target specific Alliance species. There were weapons for Corvans and Altarians and dozens of other allied races. Wang explained that these weapons were just theoretical research. The humans wanted to be prepared in case any Alliance species ever turned against Earth or became corrupted like the Devourers. She spoke about killing his people like she was discussing the weather. Her voice never changed tone even when describing the most horrible deaths. The Corvan commander realized that humans saw every other species as potential enemies. Even their closest allies were just temporary friends who might need to be eliminated someday. The humans were preparing for wars that had not happened yet against people who were currently fighting beside them. Captain Martinez found Zexthera standing alone on the observation deck later that night. The human officer seemed to understand what the Corvan was thinking. Martinez explained that humans had learned hard lessons from their history. They had almost gone extinct several times because they trusted other species too much. On Earth, humans shared their world with other intelligent species, Martinez said. Neanderthals and Denisovans and others. But humans were the only ones who survived to reach the stars. Competition for resources had forced them to eliminate their rivals. It was not cruelty, just natural selection at work. Martinez spoke about genocide like it was a biology lesson. He explained that humans had evolved to see other intelligent species as threats to be managed or removed. This instinct had kept them alive through millions of years of evolution. Now it made them perfect protectors for the galaxy, because they would do whatever was necessary to prevent extinction. The human captain showed Zexthera classified reports about human peacekeeping operations on primitive worlds. These missions involved identifying species that might evolve into threats and removing them before they could develop space travel. The humans called it preventive conservation, but it was really systematic murder. Thousands of species had been quietly eliminated over the past century. Most of them never knew humans existed. They just disappeared from diseases or climate changes or civil wars that seemed natural, but were actually carefully planned by human scientists. The galaxy was being gardened like a backyard, and unwanted weeds were being pulled. Admiral Brooks joined them on the observation deck and explained the bigger picture. The war against the Devourers was not just about stopping one threat. It was about establishing human authority over galactic civilization. Other species were too soft and naive to make the hard choices needed to keep everyone safe. Humans would take responsibility for protecting the galaxy, even if other species did not want their protection. Democracy was a luxury that worked on individual worlds, but the universe needed stronger leadership. Someone had to make decisions about which species lived and which ones died. Humans were willing to carry that burden. Zexathera understood now that the war was never really about the Devourers. It was about proving that humans were the strongest species in the galaxy, and that everyone else needed their guidance to survive. The Alliance had not gained protectors, they had gained new masters who would never let them go. 1 year into the war, Zexathera began to question which side was truly the monster. The Devourers consumed worlds and turned everything into copies of themselves. The humans studied their enemies and then used that knowledge to cause suffering that lasted much longer than simple death. Both species seemed determined to remake the galaxy in their own image. Dr. Wang had made a terrible discovery about the Devourers that changed everything. Her research team found ancient records on a dead world that told the real story of how the hive mind began. The Devourers had not always been monsters. They started as individual beings much like any other species in the galaxy. Their homeworld was dying from a plague that killed slowly and painfully. The only way to survive was to merge their minds together and share the burden of suffering. What began as a desperate attempt to save their people had turned them into something else entirely. They had given up their individual selves to avoid extinction. When Captain Martinez learned this, he did not show sympathy for the Devourers. Instead, he seemed excited by the information. He explained to Zexathera that knowing the enemy origin story made them easier to defeat. The humans could use the Devourers' fear of individual death against them in new and creative ways. Dr. Wang created weapons that forced Devourers to remember what they used to be before the merging. The consciousness bombs made them experience individual identity again, but also filled them with memories of the plague that had driven them to become a hive mind. They died remembering both their lost selves and the pain that made them give up those selves. Admiral Brooks approved the new weapons immediately. He did not care that the Devourers were once a peaceful species trying to escape disease. All that mattered was that humans now had another tool to use against them. The fact that the weapons caused extra suffering was just a bonus that might make other enemies think twice about fighting humanity. The humans began converting captured Devourers back into individual beings. But they did not do this to help them or show mercy. They wanted to study how individual Devourers thought and felt, so they could understand hive mind psychology better. The converted creatures were kept in laboratories where they were constantly tested and examined. Zexathera was allowed to visit one of these facilities on a human research station. The converted Devourers were kept in small cells and seemed to be in constant mental pain. They remembered their old lives but also knew they could never return to the collective. They were trapped between two states of being and suffered in both. Dr. Wang called the process rehabilitation and spoke about it like she was helping sick patients get better. But Zexathera could see that the converted Devourers were not being healed. They were being broken down and studied like machines that needed to be understood before they could be completely destroyed. Lieutenant Torres had been given command of a special unit that hunted Devourer scouts in deep space. Her soldiers wore armor decorated with enemy bones and treated each mission like a safari hunting trip. They would track individual Devourers for weeks and study their behavior before finally killing them in elaborate ways. The human soldiers filmed their hunts and shared the videos with other units as entertainment. They had turned the systematic murder of an entire species into a hobby that they enjoyed in their spare time. Zexathera watched one of these videos and felt sick at how much fun the humans seemed to be having. The worst discovery came when Zexathera found human children aboard one of the refugee ships. These were families of soldiers and scientists who had been evacuated from war zones. The children drew pictures of the battles and played games where they pretended to fight Devourers. To them, the war was just an exciting adventure story. One little girl showed Zexathera her drawing of Dr. Wang creating a virus. She had colored the Devourers bright green and drawn happy faces on the human soldiers. When asked what the picture meant, she explained that the nice doctor lady was helping sick aliens get better by making them not sick anymore. The child thought genocide was medicine. The human children were being raised to see other species as problems that needed solving, rather than as people with their own rights. Their parents told them stories about brave humans protecting the galaxy from monsters. The kids did not know that their heroes were also monsters, just different kinds of monsters. Captain Martinez found Zexathara watching the children play war games in the ship recreation area. The human officer sat down and explained that this was how Earth children had always played. Humans learned about conflict and survival from a very young age because their world had been dangerous for millions of years. On Earth, there had been many species that could think and use tools, Martinez said. But humans were the only ones left because they were better at war than their cousins. The Neanderthals and Denisovans and others had been smart, but they were not smart enough. Evolution favored the species that could kill most effectively. Martinez explained that humans had not chosen to become killers. They were made into killers by millions of years of survival pressure. Every generation that survived was the one that could fight better than the generation before. Eventually, they became so good at war that no other species on their world could compete with them. The human captain showed Zexathara historical records from Earth. Pictures of human cities built on top of mass graves from their own species. Wars that killed hundreds of millions of people over resources or ideas or simple hatred. Humans had been practicing genocide on each other for thousands of years before they ever met aliens. Admiral Brooks arrived in the recreation area and joined their conversation. He wanted to show Zexathara something important about human nature. The Admiral brought up classified files on his datapad that contained the real war plans. What the Corvan commander saw made his forearms shake with terror. The humans had been deliberately prolonging the war against the Devourers. They could have ended the conflict months earlier using the weapons they already possessed, but they chose to let it continue because they wanted more time to study their enemies and test new methods of extermination. Brooks explained that the Devourers were just practice for worse threats that might come later. The galaxy was full of dangerous species that had not revealed themselves yet. Humans needed to be ready for anything, so they used each war as a training exercise to prepare for the next one. Every battle was designed to gather information about how different species fought and died. Every weapon was tested to see how much fear it could create in enemy populations. The humans were not just fighting the current war, they were preparing to fight every possible future war against every possible enemy. The Admiral showed Zexathara detailed files about alliance species, including plans for defeating them if they ever became hostile. There were strategies for conquering Corva and breaking Altarian space fleets and destroying a dozen other allied worlds. The humans had been preparing to betray their friends from the very beginning. Dr. Wang joined them and explained the scientific value of prolonging the war. She had learned more about xenobiology in the past year than most researchers discovered in entire lifetimes. The suffering of millions of beings was worth it if it helped humans protect the galaxy from future threats. Zexathara realized that humans did not see other species as people. They saw them as data points in a vast equation about galactic survival. Every alien was either a resource to be used or a threat to be eliminated. There was no middle ground where different species could simply exist alongside each other. The war against the Devourers was entering its final phase, but Zexathara no longer wanted to see it end. He knew that human victory would not bring peace to the galaxy. It would only prove that the strongest predator had taken control of everything. The age of human dominance was about to begin, and no other species would ever be truly free again. The final battle against the Devourers was about to begin, and Zexathara knew it would be more terrible than anything the galaxy had seen before. Admiral Brooks had assembled the largest human fleet in history above the last Devourer stronghold. But the humans were not planning a simple military victory. They wanted to make an example that would terrify every species in the galaxy. Dr. Wang had completed her most horrifying creation yet. She called it the evolution virus and explained it to Zexathara like she was discussing a new medicine. The weapon would not just kill Devourers, it would force them to evolve backward through millions of years of development in just a few minutes before they died. The virus would make each Devourer experience every stage of evolution their species had gone through. They would feel themselves becoming primitive animals, then simple plants, then basic microbes, before finally dissolving into nothing. It was like forcing someone to watch their entire family tree die in reverse order, while feeling every death as their own. Captain Martinez was excited about testing the new weapon on such a large scale. He explained that the evolution virus would provide valuable data about how consciousness worked during rapid biological changes. The suffering of an entire species was just a side effect of important scientific research, but the virus was not the worst part of the human plan. Admiral Brooks had been holding secret meetings with Alliance leaders during the past months. He had convinced them that other species needed human guidance to prevent future wars. The galaxy was too dangerous for naive aliens to govern themselves. The human admiral showed Zexathara the new galactic charter that would take effect after the war ended. Every Alliance world would have human advisors who could override local governments if they made decisions that threatened galactic security. It looked like democracy, but humans would control everything that mattered. Lieutenant Torres had been promoted to colonel and now commanded an entire division of human marines. Her soldiers had been studying how to occupy and control alien worlds without making it look like conquest. They called it peacekeeping, but Zexathara recognized it as the preparation for a police state. Torres showed Zexathara classified footage of human operations on primitive worlds. The video showed human agents eliminating entire species that might evolve into threats over the next million years. They used diseases and climate manipulation and carefully planned disasters that looked completely natural. The colonel explained that humans had identified 12 species in the galaxy that could become dangerous if they developed advanced technology. These races would be quietly eliminated over the next century using methods that would never be traced back to human interference. The galaxy was being gardened like a farm, and unwanted crops were being removed. Dr. Wang had expanded her research to include detailed biological studies of every Alliance species. She had created specific weapons designed to target the unique weaknesses of Corvans and Altarians, and dozens of other allied races. When Zexathara asked why she was making weapons to kill their friends, she said it was just good planning. The doctor showed him detailed plans for biological weapons that could wipe out his entire homeworld in less than a week. She had identified genetic markers unique to Corvan DNA and created viruses that would only affect his species. She spoke about ending his entire civilization like she was discussing pest control methods. Captain Martinez revealed that humans had been recording everything during the war. Every conversation with alien allies had been monitored and analyzed. Every battle plan shared by other species had been studied for weaknesses. The humans knew more about Alliance military capabilities than most Alliance leaders did. The human captain showed Zexathara files containing detailed psychological profiles of every important alien leader in the galaxy. The humans knew exactly how to manipulate each species into doing what they wanted. They had turned the entire Alliance into puppets, without anyone realizing what was happening. As the final battle approached, Zexathara tried to warn other Alliance officers about what the humans were really planning, but no one would listen to him. The humans had saved too many worlds and won too many battles. Other species saw them as heroes who could do no wrong. The few aliens who did believe Zexathara were too afraid to speak out. They knew that opposing humanity meant their worlds would lose human protection against future threats. It was better to live as slaves than to die as free beings. The humans had made themselves indispensable through calculated acts of heroism. The final assault on the Devourer stronghold began with a broadcast to the entire galaxy. Admiral Brooks wanted every species to watch as humanity demonstrated what happened to enemies of galactic peace. The battle would be transmitted live to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. The human fleet surrounded the last Devourer world and began releasing Dr. Wang evolution virus into the atmosphere. Zexathara watched from the flagship bridge as an entire civilization began dying in the most horrible way imaginable. The Devourers did not just die, they experienced millions of years of evolutionary pain in minutes. The virus spread through the hive mind like wildfire, and every Devourer felt the deaths of all the others. They experienced not just their own evolutionary regression, but also the regression of every member of their species. It was like watching your entire family tree collapse while feeling every branch break inside your own mind. Human soldiers landed on the planet's surface and began systematically destroying every trace of Devourer civilization. They burned libraries and museums and art galleries while recording everything for historical analysis. The humans did not just want to kill their enemies, they wanted to erase them from existence completely. Colonel Torres led teams that collected samples from dying Devourers for Dr. Wang research projects. Even in their final moments, the enemies were being studied and cataloged like specimens in a laboratory. The humans wanted to understand every detail of how extinction worked, so they could perfect it for future use. The broadcast showed human soldiers celebrating as the last devourers died around them. They posed for pictures next to piles of enemy corpses and planted human flags on the ruins of alien cities. The humans were not just winning a war, they were performing a show of dominance for the entire galaxy to see. Admiral Brooks gave a speech that was transmitted to every world in the Alliance. He spoke about the brave sacrifice of human soldiers and the importance of preventing future threats to galactic peace. He made humanity sound like reluctant heroes who only fought because no one else was strong enough to protect the innocent. But Zexthera knew the truth. The humans had not saved the galaxy, they had conquered it. The Devourers were gone, but they had been replaced by something far worse. A species that could commit genocide while convinced they were doing the right thing. A species that would never stop expanding and controlling until everything in the universe belonged to them. As the victory celebrations began across human space, Zexthara realized that the war had never been about stopping the Devourers. It had been about proving that humans were the strongest predator in the galaxy. Every other species would now live at their mercy and call it protection. The age of human dominance had begun, and it would last until they found another threat to unite the galaxy against. Zexthera suspected that when they ran out of external enemies, the humans would start creating internal ones. Any species that grew too independent or too strong would suddenly become a danger that needed to be eliminated for the greater good. The galaxy had traded one monster for another, and most beings would never realize what had happened. They would live their lives grateful for human protection, while slowly losing the freedom to make their own choices. The humans had not liberated anyone, they had simply made slavery look like salvation. 3 years had passed since the war ended, and Zexthara sat in the interview room trying to find words for what he had seen. The documentary team from Galactic Broadcasting wanted to hear about human heroes who saved the galaxy from the terrible Devourers. They had no idea they were asking him to describe the most frightening species he had ever encountered. The Corvin commander looked at the recording equipment and wondered how much truth he could tell before human monitors. Decided he had said too much. Every conversation in Alliance space was watched now, not by obvious surveillance, but by helpful human advisors who made sure nothing dangerous was discussed. Captain Martinez now served as cultural liaison to Corva, which meant he controlled everything important that happened on Zexthera homeworld. The human officer had an office in the Corvan capital and attended every government meeting. He never gave direct orders, but somehow Corvan leaders always ended up doing exactly what he suggested. Dr. Wong ran medical research stations throughout Alliance space, where she studied alien biology for the good of galactic health. Her laboratories were always busy with important work that no one was allowed to see. She published papers about disease prevention, but Zexthera knew she was really creating new ways to kill specific species. Admiral Brooks had been promoted to Galactic Defense Coordinator, which meant he controlled all military forces in Alliance space. No world could build ships or train soldiers without his approval. He said this was necessary to prevent future wars, but it really meant no species could defend itself against human occupation. Colonel Torres commanded peacekeeping forces on 17 different worlds, where she made sure local populations remained calm and cooperative. Her soldiers wore Alliance uniforms, but they followed human orders. Any planet that showed signs of independence quickly received visits from Torres units to restore order. The documentary team asked Zexthera to describe the bravery of human soldiers during the war. He told them about watching Martinez smile while Devourers died from their own converted weapons. The reporters thought he was describing the satisfaction of victory. They did not understand he was talking about the joy of watching suffering. When asked about Dr. Wang's scientific contributions, Zexthera explained how she created viruses that forced enemies to experience individual consciousness before death. The interviewers nodded approvingly and said it sounded like a humane way to help confused creatures find peace. They had no idea she was describing sophisticated torture. The reporters wanted to know about the final battle and how Admiral Brooks had saved the galaxy from the Devourer threat. Zexthera described the evolution virus that made an entire species experience millions of years of evolutionary pain before dying. The documentary team called it a merciful end to their suffering, Every answer Zexithara gave was being recorded, not just by the news team but also by human intelligence services. He could see the monitoring equipment hidden in the walls and knew that every word was being analyzed for signs of dangerous thinking. Speaking the truth had become an act of rebellion that could get entire worlds punished. The lead interviewer asked about the current state of galactic peace under human protection. Zexithara explained that Alliance worlds now had human advisors who helped local governments make better decisions. He did not mention that these advisors had veto power over any choice that humans disapproved of. When asked about his personal feelings toward humanity, Zexithara said they were the most effective warriors he had ever seen. The reporters assumed this was praise, but he meant it as a warning. Humans were effective at everything they did, including the systematic elimination of freedom throughout the galaxy. The documentary team wanted to know if Zexithara thought the galaxy was safer now than before the war. He told them that humans had eliminated many threats that other species never even knew existed. This was true, but the biggest threat they had eliminated was the possibility that any other species would ever be truly independent again. As the interview continued, Zexithara realized that everything he said was being twisted into propaganda for human heroism. His descriptions of human efficiency became stories about dedication to galactic peace. His warnings about human methods became praise for their innovative problem-solving. The reporters asked if he had any concerns about the future of human-alien relations. Zexithara said he was sure humans would continue protecting the galaxy from any threat that emerged. He did not add that humans would also decide what counted as a threat, and that list would include any species that wanted to govern itself. Near the end of the interview, Zexithara tried to give a real warning about what humans represented. He began to explain that humanity was more dangerous than any external enemy because they made slavery look like protection. But before he could finish his sentence, the interview room door opened. Human security officers entered the room wearing Alliance uniforms and polite smiles. They explained that Commander Zexithara had been under tremendous stress since the war and needed medical attention. The documentary team was told the interview would need to end early for the Commander Health and Safety as they escorted him from the room. Zexithara tried to tell the reporters that humans did not protect civilizations, they domesticated them. But his words were cut off by concerned human medical officers who said the poor veteran was suffering from war trauma that made him paranoid about his own rescuers. The documentary was broadcast across the galaxy 6 months later, but Zexithara warnings had been edited out completely. The final version showed him praising human courage and wisdom while describing their innovative solutions to galactic threats. His fear had been transformed into admiration through careful editing. Children across Alliance worlds watched the documentary in their schools and learned about the brave humans who saved everyone from the terrible devourers. They drew pictures of human heroes and played games where they pretended to fight monsters just like their protectors had done during the Great War. Their parents watched the same program and smiled while feeling sick inside. Most adults in the galaxy knew the truth about human control, but they also knew that speaking about it openly would bring human attention to their worlds. It was better to stay quiet and hope their children never learned what freedom actually meant. Zexithara spent the rest of his life in comfortable retirement on Corva under the watchful care of human medical staff. He was treated well and given everything he needed except the ability to speak freely about what he had seen during the war. His memoirs were never published and his warnings were never heard. Years passed and new generations grew up believing that humans were the greatest heroes in galactic history. They learned that before human protection, the galaxy had been a dangerous place full of monsters like the Devourers. They were taught to be grateful for human guidance and to report anyone who questioned human wisdom. The galaxy became a peaceful place where no one fought wars anymore because humans prevented conflicts before they could start. Species that might have become aggressive were quietly eliminated before they could threaten anyone. Worlds that showed signs of independence were given additional human advisors to help them make better choices. Captain Martinez was promoted to ambassador and spent his time traveling between worlds to ensure everyone remained happy with human protection. Dr. Wang became director of galactic health and continued her research into alien biology for the benefit of all species. Admiral Brooks was named Supreme Defense Coordinator and managed threats that only humans were qualified to handle. The documentary about Zexithara became required viewing in Alliance schools where it taught young minds about the importance of human leadership. The edited interview showed a grateful alien veteran praising his human saviors and warning future generations never to forget the lesson of the Devourer War. But the real lesson was never spoken aloud. The galaxy had learned that there were worse things than being consumed by monsters. Sometimes the cure was more dangerous than the disease. Sometimes protectors were just predators with better public relations. Sometimes salvation looked exactly like conquest if you knew how to market it properly. The age of human dominance continued unopposed because no one dared to oppose it. The strongest species in the galaxy had convinced everyone else that strength was the same thing as righteousness. They had made themselves indispensable through calculated acts of heroism, and then used that dependency to control everything that mattered. The galaxy was safe, peaceful, and completely enslaved.